Let's do that again. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Nimzi Live. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Welcome to Nimzi Live. This is the second event in our Nimzi's Gen AI event series. Second event. It's also the second time that I have the pleasure and the honor of hosting the event. So thank you very much for that, dear Nimzi team. And it's also the second time that we have a very decent amount of registrations, a lot of people in the room today. So we have all the ingredients to host a very informative and very nice session for you today. And now it looks like we're all set up to kick this session off. I have a small note before we get started. We are working with a brand new studio setup, meaning that the live can get cut off at some point. It's not supposed to happen, but if it happens, please go to Nimzi's LinkedIn page, where we will try to relaunch the live as soon as possible. And if it really doesn't work out for us, then we will record the session anyway and share it with all of you. And then I think we're all set to get started and we can bring up the slides and I'll be more than happy to talk you through them. Today's session is called Breaking Down LLM Use Cases. What do we have on the menu for you today? We're going to break down one specific LLM use case. We're going to analyze it from top to bottom. We're going to explain how you can configure the use case yourself and how you could potentially deploy it within your own process and within your own technology stack. Before we start, I would like to introduce myself to you. My name is Jourik Ciesielski. I'm wearing a couple of hats within the language services industry. I'm the CTO of an amazing LSP based here in Belgium, where I live. I run my own company, and I'm also involved with Nimzi Insights, where I work on and contribute to all kinds of interesting things in the position of senior consultant and researcher. My main fields of expertise are number one, audiovisual translation. So everything that is centered around speech, speech to text, text to speech, video localization, machine translation, generative AI, and large language models, which makes sense, which is why I'm hosting today's session. And finally, the TMS market is another market I like to work on, a market I'm very, very interested in. Technology is really all I have. That's obvious from this slide. I have a passion for three services. Number one, language technology consulting. Number two, localization engineering and some small developments. And number three, market research. By the way, I'm not entirely alone in today's session. Tucker is here as well. He's operating the buttons and facilitating everything in the background. Thank you very much, Tucker, for making this happen. There he is. And then we can go on with today's agenda. This is the agenda that we've put together for you today. We will start off with an introduction just to set the stage and break the ice. In the introduction, I will take the opportunity to shamelessly promote our Gen AI event series again to you. And I will also do a recap of the previous event because today's event is an iteration of the previous one. If you've attended the previous one, then this one might make a little bit more sense than if you haven't attended the previous one. We will be talking about use cases, and I really want to explain and emphasize why LLM use cases are so different. The discussion around LLM use cases are so different compared to other language technologies, such as machine translation. I will bring up the challenges that we're facing and that we will continue to face in the coming months and probably years. And I will also highlight the opportunities that this new technology, generative AI and large language models, bring to us as an industry. Then we will move on with our use case, and the use case that we have selected for today's event is LLM-driven quality assurance. A very good one because there are a lot of problems with the current algorithms for QA and LUA, and we will talk about them. There will be one slide or two slides dedicated to technology. What are the players, for example, in the TMS market doing when it comes to LLM-driven QA features? Excuse me. And I will also dedicate one slide to the traditional build versus buy dilemma and why building might be a better option than buying in this case when it comes to large language models. And then we're going to get practical. I will explain how you could configure our use case yourselves, LLM-driven QA. And when I talk about configuration, I obviously talk about the prompt, putting the prompt together. I will list up the requirements for deploying the use case. We will provide you a deep analysis of the different components of the prompt, the system prompt, where you describe the persona, provide all kinds of formal instructions. One slide dedicated to few-shot prompting. And when you pop the final question, the ultimate question to the model, then we talk about chat completion. And that's what we will explain and analyze in today's session as well. One slide with some conclusions, and then we have one recorded demo where I will talk you through a demo of a custom application where we do LLM-driven quality assurance within a TMS environment. That's today's agenda. We're all set to continue and bring up the next slide of our presentation. Before I continue, I would like to ask you for a favor. I would like to ask you to scan the code that is being exposed on the screen right now. It will bring you to a survey, and it would be amazing if you could fill out the survey for us, thus actively participating in the session. The link to the survey has also been posted in the LinkedIn chat, so feel free to have a look and please participate in our survey. We appreciate your insights. Thank you very much in advance. There we go, our introduction. You are attending an event in Nimdzy's brand new or relatively new Gen AI event series. What is our event series? It's a series of online events, webinars centered around Gen AI and large language models and localization-oriented use cases for Gen AI and LLMs. There has been enough talking about how good it is, how amazing it is, and all the impressive things it can do, and why it sucks because of a number of reasons, and why there are so many concerns around security, etc., and so on. And all of that is true. It's very true. But I think there has been enough talking about impact and revolution and disruption. We want to focus on applications, implementation, and use cases. We want to answer one important question. How can I use this technology myself to either make my own life easier or build a brand new service around it? That's what we want to explain. That's what we want to provide and present in this series. Every session is a standalone event, meaning that the sessions are supposed to be rich enough in content to be considered as one independent event. However, there is some interconnection between the different sessions. I already mentioned that this session is actually an iteration of the previous one, and we really want to offer you a top experience by providing or by attending all the events in the series. That's our goal. That's our purpose. That's what we want to give to you. This event is for you. You've had a taste of ChatGPT, you're interested, and you want to know how you could leverage that very nice chatting with a model in a business context, but you don't know. You're curious about potential use cases, then today, this event is especially for you. This one is going to be very interesting for you. You have ideas and you want to validate them. So every idea is a potential use case. That's something that I keep on saying, that I keep on repeating. Maybe you have an idea, maybe you have a potential use case, but you want to have it confirmed. You want to know whether you're looking into the right direction or not. You want to embark on developing your own application. Maybe you want to get your hands dirty and build something yourself, which is something that I really, really support. And that's something else that will be covered extensively in today's session. So for you, this event can be very interesting as well. This event is also for you if you simply want to know what's happening in the language technology market. It will be covered a little bit less extensively today compared to the previous session, but as mentioned in the agenda, we will dedicate 1-2 slides to what, for example, the TMS players are doing are cooking in terms of Gen AI driven features and functionalities. Wonderful. We did our first event in February. It was called LLM Solutions and How to Use Them. It was a big one. We had more than 600 people actively attending the session. And I want to do a quick recap of the previous event, again, just to set the stage, break the ice, and provide a little bit of context. In the previous event, we did a very quick crash course to artificial intelligence. We provided a definition of AI. We talked about foundation models, rule-based, statistical, neural networks. We explained how neural networks work, how they learn patterns in data and produce output by continuously predicting the next best word. We talked about the deep learning principle. We talked about attention. We talked about the transformer model, which was introduced by Google in 2016 or 2017 in this famous paper, Attention is All You Need. We talked about retrieval augmented generation, a very interesting concept, will not be covered extensively today, might be a topic for a next session, but the point is crash course on artificial intelligence. We dedicated a couple of slides to use cases, and again, continuously repeating my rule of thumb, every idea is a potential use case. We explained how LLMs for machine translation could work, and we presented more potential use cases. We explained how to, embark on the Gen AI journey, and there, my rule of thumb or my primary piece of recommendation is engineers, it's time for you to step up. It's your moment to shine. If you want to get your hands dirty, you will be able to make a big impact, a big difference, either within your own organization or for the companies you're selling to. We closed the session by providing an overview of what the technology market is doing. We started with the tech giants, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, because they obviously have a strong position again, and they enable us to do a lot of interesting things and deploy models and train models and whatnot. We talked about the TMS market. We talked about the MT providers, a very delicate market right now because the core of their business, automated translation, is being impacted quite considerably. Some companies have decided to get acquired, like Systran, for example. Other companies are very busy developing all kinds of new Gen AI features. Think about Pangeianic, think about Globally. They are really doing a very good job in following the market and the market trends and requirements. We also talked a little bit about the so-called aggregators or orchestrators, Intento, CustomMT, Blackbird, because they are obviously in this game as well, and they are doing a lot of interesting things too. That being said, we can close the recap of the previous event and continue with today's topic, use cases. And again, every idea is a potential use case. Now, before I start talking about challenges, I quickly want to say or discuss why I think that the discussion around LLM use cases is different from the discussion around other use cases involving language technology. I think there's one primary reason, and that reason is that within the language services industry, we are very, very used to working with task-specific technology. Think about machine translation, think about transcription, think about text-to-speech, etc., and so on. You have an input and you get an output. It might require a little bit of editing, but even without editing, you could potentially go live with the output that you received from your technology provider. Now, all of a sudden, we have to build the tasks ourselves because LLMs are not task-specific, or most LLMs are not task-specific, meaning that you need to create the tasks and design the tasks yourself. You need to talk to the model. You need to instruct the model, provide very targeted instructions. You need to provide context. You need to define the output format that you want. You need to come up with all kinds of creative ways of applying trial and error and getting better and better and better output. And this is so new to us. We were not ready for this. Also, the way of evaluating technology has changed. When we think about machine translation, evaluating technology for machine translation, what would you do? You would benchmark a couple of technologies, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, DeepL. You would select the one that works best for your case, and you're good to go. Now, when we evaluate LLM technologies or LLM use cases, what we do is we prompt the living daylights out of ChatGPT until we reach the point where we have the illusion of having something that works as a use case. So it's completely different. Even our way of evaluating technology and use cases has changed considerably. On top of that, when thinking about the previous disruptive technology, machine translation, I believe that we haven't managed to adopt it fully yet. There's still a lack of standardization. Think about quality evaluation, think about pricing models for post-editing. Machine translation has not been fully adopted yet, and now we're already tasked with the adoption of a brand new technology, which brings a lot of uncertainty to us as an industry, and it also implies the need for brand new skills. That being said, we can continue with the challenges. Almost there. One slide back. There we go. So what are the challenges? I'm talking about uncertainty. And I think the uncertainty is mainly centered around pricing and ROI, which applies both to buying the technology or buying the service as well as selling the service. How many tokens do I consume on average per call, per request? How do I price my service per word, per hour? Subscription-based, whatever. There's no standardization. We need to create these services from scratch, which brings a lot of uncertainty. Second, quality measurement. How do we know that the output provided by a model is good? We don't know. If we want to know, we need a human in the loop. How do we detect if we need to optimize something in our framework? Again, we don't know. We need the human in the loop to detect and identify that need for us. Number three, the traditional concern, security. How secure is my data? The rule of thumb there is if you're working with a paid service, then there's nothing to worry about or not a lot to worry about. If you work with a free service, then you pay with your data. That's the rule of thumb. That's the uncertainty. Prompt engineering, that's the second part, is more complex than it sounds. And now I'm talking about the real prompt engineering, the prompt engineering beyond ChatGPT, prompting, using APIs and that kind of thing. If you really want to get the best out of your prompt, you need to apply very specific and targeted techniques, such as chain of thought prompting, for example. If you want your model to provide a quality score for you following a very complex methodology, you need to guide your model step by step through the methodology. That's chain of thought prompting. Few shot prompting, so giving examples, creating chat history, that's another very important technique, one technique that's very relevant and really produces added value. There's RAG, it always comes back, retrieval augmented generation, where you deploy a second model that will store your context and convert it into embeddings, and then your actual LLM will look at those embeddings as the only source of truth. Very powerful, but still unexplored territory for us as an industry. Now, there's a third challenge, and I don't know why I did not add it to the slide, but the third challenge is, of course, the accuracy, the performance of those models. There are still hallucinations. It's very likely that every once in a while, the models produce just pieces of crap. That's very likely to happen. Performance-wise, it goes a lot slower than when you request a translation via neural machine translation engine. The APIs crash every once in a while. There are timeouts every once in a while. So performance and accuracy is another thing that we still need to look at as a challenge for us as an industry. But of course, if there are challenges, there also are opportunities. And first of all, I would like to say that I really genuinely believe that Gen AI and LLMs have the potential, are powerful enough to revolutionize everything that we are doing in our job, in our daily job, in translation workflows, which goes from workflow management to automated translation to quality assurance to everything. However, I don't think that it's going to happen overnight, because as an industry, we are a little bit reluctant to change, and we will not trade our current ways of working for something new overnight. It's just not going to happen. However, I do believe that Gen AI and LLMs, and we can bring up the slide now because that is one of the bullets. I do believe that now we have a unique opportunity to rethink and redesign some of the most obsolete disciplines in our industry, and QA is one of them. Second, I do want to emphasize that if you're an engineer, if you're whatever localization stakeholder you are, it doesn't matter, but you want to get your hands dirty. You get to work with this new technology. You prompt, you provide context, you craft instructions, etc., and so on. Remember that once you know how to prompt a model to, for example, produce a translation in accordance with certain instructions and reference data and whatnot, you will also be able to prompt the model to edit a translation in accordance with the same criteria, to evaluate a translation in accordance with the same criteria, and so on and so forth. So once you really dominate this whole concept of working with LLMs, I think a lot of interesting doors to a lot of interesting use cases will open to you and to us as an industry. There we go. Moving on, I do want to start talking about our use case for today. I was freezing for a little while there, but I think I'm back. I do want to start talking about our LLM-driven quality assurance, the use case that we want to highlight and break down today. There we go. First of all, I think it makes sense to highlight why I believe that LLMs can really offer a better solution than what we have currently in place for QA and LQA. And if we can bring up the slides, I will talk you through it. I'm just bundling QA and LQA on the same slide here because I think there are problems with the two disciplines in this case. But let's start with QA, the most troublesome, according to me. What are some of the problems with QA? First of all, the biggest problem, it produces high, even insane amounts of false positives, hundreds of false positives, even thousands of false positives in big projects. You really need to fight your way through all those false positives to hopefully detect, identify one minor mistake whose impact would be very, very low if it wasn't detected. That's problem number one. It simply does not resonate with the current technology climate, where everything needs to go fast and agile, etc., and so on. Problem number two, QA is not context aware. If in scenario A, you need to format a number like this, but in scenario B, you need to format the number differently, there's no way of telling your QA algorithm to take that context into account. It simply doesn't work. It's rule-based. It's not context-aware. It's only customizable to a certain extent. It's very hard to create tailored QA checks. And of course, I know it's possible to write your own QA checks using regular expressions. It's very nice. Every engineer loves it. I like it too. And I have to admit that it gives like workarounds for the context problem in some cases, but regex simply is not powerful enough to carry the weight of a very big and a very extensive quality program. You won't cut it by creating a couple of regex-based quality assurance check. And then maybe another very, very big problem, the algorithm hasn't changed in more than 20 years. And this actually applies to the whole TMS market. TMS hasn't changed in 30 years. A TMS, in the end, still is a tool where you upload a file, it gets segmented, it's displayed in a source next to target view, bilingual. You have to translate segment per segment. You can leverage a translation memory, a term base, and you can run some instant quality checks, but that's it. True TMS providers are adding more and more functionalities to their systems, project management, reporting, user management, quality monitoring, APIs, integrations, you name it. All of that is very, very true. But the core of a TMS hasn't changed in 30 years. Exact same thing with QA. QA is still rule-based, it needs to look for a dot in the source. And whenever there is a dot in the source, there also needs to be a dot in the target. Otherwise, we flag an error. Very obsolete. And again, it does not resonate with the current technology climate that we are living and working in. That's QA. Let's continue with LQA. That is true. Yeah. Yeah, I think the answer is yes. And again, I mean, when working with LLMs, you need to define the task yourself. And if for you and for your organization, the ideal task is some kind of mash between QA, so the traditional QA rules, and the LQA scoring on the other hand, then yes, you can obviously make that work. But again, it sounds a lot easier than it actually is, because your prompts need to be so targeted, you need to apply all the right techniques. But from a technical point of view, I do believe that is possible. That's a definite yes.
Yeah, and sorry about that, Karina. Everybody, they couldn't hear me, so I was just reading the comments in there. Susanna says, "Is there a hybrid between QA and LQA, and would that be more advantageous?" That was the question Jourik was just responding to.
There we go.
All right, thanks, Renato. Anyone else want to tell me they can't hear me? You should be able to hear me now. All right, back to you, Jourik. Take her away.
Thank you, Tucker. Where were we?
We are on the TMS market.
There we go. I think I was still talking a little bit about LQA. So we covered QA and why it's obsolete and why it's a good candidate to be replaced by something new. On the previous slide, I think we still need to talk a little bit about LQA. So if you can go one slide back, there we go, and take it from here.
Go for it.
LQA, completely human process. And of course, the fact that it's a human process is not the problem, not at all, but it has two side effects. The first one is that it's time consuming. A human needs to go through all the content, provide an evaluation, a scoring, and everything that entails or that is entailed with executing LQA. Number two, human evaluation isn't entirely unbiased either. That is a fact. Now, I do want to add two more comments to this. And the first comment is that LQA is very nicely standardized, which is very, very good. I like it. And I do believe that our industry lacks a little bit of standardization here and there. But I think that if we stay too close to our traditional methodologies and we don't dare to move away from them, we might limit the AI capabilities that could be very advantageous for us as an industry. So here I would say, let's not stick too much to the standards and let's think out of the box and see whether we can come up with something else. That's note number one. Note number two is quality is in the eyes of the beholder. The definition of quality for me can be different than the definition of quality for you. And I do believe that the definition of quality will be more and more connected to the performance of your content. So if your translated content does what it is supposed to do, if it accomplishes its goal, then that's the definition of quality. And I think we're moving towards that definition of the whole quality concept in our industry. And we won't be looking at dots and commas anymore to define what is good quality or not. That being said, now we can move on to TMS. So this is basically a recap of what we discussed in the previous event as well. There's a lot of activity in the TMS market when it comes to implementing LLM-driven features. And right now, we can categorize all those efforts, all those initiatives in three classifications in 3 categories. The first one is automated translation. So leveraging large language models to produce automated translation. It can be instant machine translation, but it can also be automated post-editing. And it's very difficult to highlight a couple of names here in this category because basically every TMS provider is in this game, but I do want to highlight one tendency, one observation that's pretty special. The tech, well, not the tech giants, but the tech-enabled LSPs within our industry. And I'm talking about TransPerfect with GlobalLink, RWS with Trados, and SmartLink. They all seem to invest a lot in automated post-editing, selling it as one specific component in a larger package of language services. So that's something that they seem to have in common. I also want to highlight MemoQ here because they are working on a new version of adaptive machine translation built on GPT 3.5 Turbo, leveraging your data, your translation memories, and your glossaries when producing translations. Creative assistance. What is creative assistance? You're working in your TMS, you're translating content, and you have an assistant in there who helps you by rephrasing translations, shortening translations, suggesting alternative translations, performing SEO optimization, that kind of thing. And the most important observation here is that the specialized TMSs, so the TMSs that specialize in strings localization, for example, are particularly good at this. And I'm talking about crowd-in, localized transifex, and I'm sorry, and I would like to apologize to the names that I'm not mentioning here on this slide. That was covered in the previous event. Today, we want to talk a little bit more about QA and what are the big names, the TMS top players doing in the field of QA. I do have a couple of references by now. Some features have been released and we can briefly discuss them. I think it's good to mention Localize as the first name here because they were basically the first TMS provider to come up with some AI-driven QA feature. It's basically producing instant LQA evaluations based on the DQ, on the NQM framework. Again, sticking to the standard, but it's okay. They were the first. They took the initiative. Good job, Localize. Similar thing in Phrase. They recently released an auto QA, an auto LQA feature, which basically does the same thing, instant LQA evaluations following the MQM framework. And then we have 2 names in there, Lilt and Transifex, who are doing things a little bit differently, especially Transifex seems to have a slightly different approach. They perform quality evaluations on translated content. They highlight what needs to be done with the segment in order to come to a good quality translation. And they also indicate who needs to implement the modification. Is it the linguist? Is it the reviewer? Is it the proofreader? Whatever stakeholder needs to take care of it, Transifex will try to indicate this for you. It's a brand new feature. Too early to talk about efficiency and relevancy and whatnot, but it's nice that we have this kind of initiative in the TMS market, and I anticipate that we will be seeing more similar QA initiatives in the near future in our technology market. That being said, we can move on. Engineers, time to step up. This is where I want to emphasize or maybe prove why I think that it might be worth the effort of building something yourself, and it doesn't need to be very comprehensive and super spectacular and super expensive. You can do a lot with very low resources as well, if you like. But the message here is, engineers, time to step up. It's your moment to shine. It's your moment to make a difference, and you can make a difference either within your own organization for your internal stakeholders, or if you're a more commercial company, if you're selling products, then you can make a big difference there yourself. Now, why do I think that it's worth the effort of building something? We can go to the next slide for that. There we go. I think the most important reason is that because of the nature of large language models and the fact that we have to prompt ourselves and provide instructions and define the output that we want to have, etc., and so on, because of this versatility of this new technology, I believe we can't expect every language technology company to support every use case for us, to support every way of retrieving context, to support every prompting technique, etc., and so on. It's simply impossible. We need to get our hands dirty, and if we want to have something tailored, we need to build it ourselves. The difference with MT can't be any bigger because that's limited to two use cases only. Either you do pure machine translation, raw machine translation, or machine translation post-editing. But this one-size-fits-all really does not apply to Gen AI and LLMs. And if you think of it, in a way, tech companies, if you feel like you're struggling with the whole Gen AI implementation, either you're a localization department within a corporation, either you're a language service providers, if you feel that you're struggling, I can tell you that tech companies have the same struggles as well. Because what they build today can be obsolete tomorrow. That's not a secret, that's a fact. Furthermore, everything that they build, whether it's a free prompt editor, whatnot, it can be easily reproduced by your competition. So if you think that you're struggling, I can tell you that tech companies are having a hard time with this as well. So what do I believe? If we don't start building ourselves, if we don't get our hands dirty ourselves, we might not be able to explore the full potential of Gen AI. We might be able to miss out on very good opportunities. And I think that's something we should really avoid. Again, one size fits all really does not apply to large language models and generative AI. And then I think it's almost time to get practical. Not almost, it is time to get practical. Now we want to break down our use case and we want to talk about it and talk you through it from start to finish, from prompting to deployment. So let's do it. Now, before we start, I do want to share a disclaimer here. The approach to LLM-driven QA that we will be providing in the next couple of slides, it's my approach to doing it. It's just one possible solution. It's very okay if you have your own approach to it, if you apply other prompting techniques, if you have other ways of retrieving context, that is fine. Again, one size fits all does not apply. This is one approach, one possible approach. Other approaches are perfectly fine as well. I also want to emphasize once more, and I actually mentioned it already, working with LLMs implies that the output is often very unpredictable. It's not always easy to control. If you do the same query twice, it might look different. It will look different, undoubtedly. So human sign-off will always be needed, even if you rely on LLMs to take care of your QA. So it's good. I believe it has a lot of potential, but it's not the holy grail. We still need humans and we need to have the right expectations. It's technology, it can go wrong. And at this point, at this level of maturity, it will still go wrong when you do it. That's a note I wanted to share before I promise that everything is possible. Okay, there we go. Requirements. What do you need if you want to configure the use case? You need a couple of things. First of all, you need a good set of formal instructions that you want to provide the model with. Please don't ask your model, dear model, evaluate this translation for me, because that is not going to work. And it sounds very obvious, but I've seen so many cases where prompts are limited to just that. Please evaluate the translation for me. Yeah, that's not going to work. Context. If you define something as a style error, or if you want your model to check for style errors, you need to define what a style error is, right? You need to give examples. The model needs to know what a style error entails according to you. Context is so very important even for humans. If you ask humans to do something to perform translation without context, it can go wrong as well. So even for AI models, context is very important. The desired output. What do you want in terms of output? Do you want a score? Do you want a pass-fail indication? Do you want an indication of severity? Do you want an explanation? Do you want a combination of things? You need to tell the model what you expect, right? Please don't ask it to evaluate the translation, because it will be free to give you whatever the model thinks it should give you. And then, of course, once you have all of this data, all of these instructions and context and output format, you need to mash everything together into a well-defined and a targeted prompting strategy. Once you reach that point, you have something that works, you prompt the model to evaluate the translation for you, you get some decent output back, you need to deploy it. And where are you going to deploy it? ChatGPT. I think a lot of people will use ChatGPT for a lot of things and create chats and store them and then pick up that chat again and add more questions to it. That's a viable approach, but that's of course something that I would not recommend you to do. Do you want to build some kind of standalone application, an application that can read files, whatever file format you want to process in there, and then the model needs to do its magic? Fine. Do you want to have it integrated in your TMS, in your CMS, in whatever content repository you're managing? That is perfectly fine as well. And my feeling, based on my projects, based on the clients that I have been working with, integration is for most clients the way to go. That's what they want. That's what they wish. Okay, let's have a look at our prompt. And we need to start with the system prompt. The system prompt is designed to describe the persona that the model is supposed to take. It's designed to provide the model with every formal instruction that it needs to follow. And you can also use it to leverage a little bit of context and reference data in there. You are a linguist who works from source language into target language. You specialize in domain. Your task is to run quality evaluations on translations according to instructions defined in style guides and terminology specified in glossaries. You must take the original source text into account when evaluating translations. This is where we describe the persona that the model is supposed to take. Then we continue with formal instructions. Classify a style guide error as major. Classify a terminology error as critical. And of course, this is demo content. This is very compact. In your own case, you would do it completely differently. Totally agree. This is just a demo. Follow this style guide, and then we pull in an entire style guide. This is one way of providing context. Use this glossary to evaluate terminology, and then we put in a glossary, another way of leveraging context. This is the source text that corresponds to the translation that needs to be evaluated, and then we give it the original source text. Again, a way of providing context. Return the evaluation in the following format: error type, tab, error severity, tab, error explanation. Example, very important, give the model examples. Terminology, tab, critical, tab, term X has not been translated according to the glossary. And then follows something very, very important. Return the following message if no errors are identified. No errors identified. Because if you don't tell the model to do this in case of no errors, it will probably come up and create its own errors and give you something that doesn't make sense at all. So this is very, very important. What does the model need to do in case there are no errors identified in the translation that we're going to evaluate? Very, very important. Don't forget this. I'm also working with variables. And again, this is my own approach to it. I'm working with variables in my prompts, and I'm basically pulling in all kinds of data and metadata from the data that I'm processing, the source language, the target language, the source text, the style guide is fed into the prompt, the glossary is fed into the prompt. This allows me to take one prompt or reuse the same prompt across clients, across domains, across whatever use case I'm using it for. That's the system prompt. We can continue with the next technique in our prompt, which is few shot prompting. What is few shot prompting? When you perform few shot prompting, you're basically artificially creating a conversation with the model. You're asking it questions, which is done using the user role, and you're answering the questions yourself using the assistant role. Why is this important? Because it indicates how the model needs to behave. It also indicates what output format the model needs to give. Even though you define it as a formal instruction, the model will move away from it. So examples are very, very critical. Evaluate the following French translation, taking into account the style guide, the terminology, and the corresponding source text. Conseil de santé, no errors identified. Ayez confiance en votre chirurgien et demandez de l'aide à votre pharmacien. Style, tab, major, tab. The generic masculine is used in chirurgien and pharmacien, which is not okay in accordance with our style guide, for example. Evaluate the following French translation. Assurez-vous de vérifier votre dossier de santé électronique. Terminology, tab, critical, tab. The term dossier de santé électronique is not correct according to the glossary. I've limited this to 3 shots, which is perfectly fine for my use case. You can add more shots, less shots. It doesn't matter. This is what few shot prompting is about. You create the conversation yourself, you ask the questions yourself, and you answer the questions yourself. And this is leveraged as chat history and context in your prompt. Very, very important. And then we have the last step of the prompt, which is the chat completion. This is where you pop the ultimate question to the model. Evaluate the following target language translation, taking into account the style guide, the terminology, and the corresponding source text, and then you give it the target text, and the answer that you then receive from the model, that is your final output. That is what you will write into your application, into the system where you have it integrated. It doesn't matter where, but that's the final output of the model. System prompt, few shot prompting, chat completion, output, and that's what you work with. That's what you get from the model. And then we can continue with the last part of our event today. First of all, I want to give you a couple of conclusions, a wrap up of the session today, a couple of bullets. The fact that we have to design, LLM use cases ourselves is a big paradigm shift. This is new to us, it brings uncertainty, and it implies that we need to learn new skills. Despite the opportunities, there are still many challenges to be addressed. Think about quality evaluation, think about pricing, think about ROI, think about security, which was a question in the chat. Think about the general performance of the models. Still a lot of questions that remain unanswered. Traditional QA and traditional LQA have become a little bit obsolete. QA a little bit more than LQA, according to me. 2 different disciplines, but they have their problems. We're observing signs of a breakthrough in TMS. Localizes in the game, phrases in the game, lilt and trans effects are in the game. And when you build something yourself, there are many, many possible approaches to what you build, different prompting techniques, different context retrieval methods. There's the RAG, retrieval augmented generation. Don't forget about that concept because it's very, very powerful, etc., and so on. And therefore, I believe that building might be a better option than buying in this case, on the condition, of course, that you have enough resources and experience and expertise in-house to make that work. And then we can close the session with a demo. We will show you the prompts that we've discussed in the previous slide in a video, a demo. So it's the exact same prompt. First, I will describe the scenario. In the demo, we are working for a healthcare client. We're working from English into French. And the main point for this client is that we need to produce gender inclusive translations. That's what we need to do. Our use case, our prompt, our application is integrated directly in a TMS environment. We will be using Phrase for this demo, but MemoQ and XDM are supported as well. And all of the important data and metadata are fetched directly from the jobs in Phrase. So if we want to retrieve the source language, we get it from the job in Phrase. If we want to retrieve the target language, we do the same thing. If we want to retrieve the source language, we do the same thing. If we want to retrieve the previous segment, we do the same thing. Everything is fetched dynamically from our content in Phrase. We perform our check against an external style guide, which is parsed into the prompt, against an external glossary, which is also parsed into the prompt, and we write our results of our QA check into a custom HTML report. The demo has been recorded, but I'm happy to talk you through it. Here we go. So we start from our reference materials. First of all, we have a style guide, which we are opening now. And as I mentioned, the main point, the key idea behind the style guide is that we need to produce gender inclusive translations. We're not going to read the style guide out loud, but we will highlight a couple of specific instructions in there. For example, translate ask your pharmacist to help you as demander conseil en pharmacie, which means go ask for help in the pharmacy. Don't use a masculine pronoun. Another example that will be highlighted in the style guide: when using epicene words is not possible, use point médian to write in both genders. For example, chirurgien, chirurgienne. So we need to include the feminine form there at all costs. We have a glossary, a very basic one, only 2 terms. The English term app needs to be translated as appli, would be application normally, and electronic health record needs to be translated as dossier médical informatisé, which is again not exactly the most obvious translation for this source term. That's the glossary. We've covered the reference material, and we can move to phrase, I believe now. There we go. This is our job in phrase. We have 4 segments in our job. The first 2 segments are translation memory matches, so we're obviously going to skip them. We're not going to check them. And then we have 2 segments with a couple of problems in there. Chirurgien is a masculine pronoun. Pharmacien is a masculine pronoun. That's not okay. It's pure machine translation. Dossier de santé électronique is a good translation for electronic health record, but it's not the translation that we want, according to the glossary. Same thing with application, which needs to be translated as appli rather than application. And then we can bring up our very own application. We will launch it from the command line, which is going to happen now. Please define which TMS you are using. We are using phrase in this case. We hit enter and we continue. We specify the domain of the content which is going to be evaluated and hit enter. Healthcare in this case. We specify the location of the reference materials, the style guides, and the glossary references. And we need to specify the project ID for our application to recognize the project. And the project ID in phrase is the last part of your URL. We're going to copy that. We're going back to our documents, and we're going to paste the project ID in our application. We hit enter and we pray for the best. The job has been successfully fetched. We receive a message that our AI QA check has been completed. And we have a link to an error report, which has been generated for us. There's the full link. We're going to copy it, and we're going to open it right away. Open that file. And here is our AI QA report. AI QA log, this is custom built. Note, the goal of this QA log is to demonstrate how we can deploy AI-driven QA, nothing more, nothing less. The first 2 segments in our document have been skipped because they are TM matches. Obviously, we don't need to check those. There are cases where you need to check them. Doesn't apply right now. Then we have a style error, severity major. The translation uses generic masculine forms instead of inclusive language. And we have another problem, terminology critical. The terms dossier de santé électronique and application are not translated according to the glossary. And this is an example of how you could deploy your very own AI QA use case. This demo has been executed using the prompt that was explained in today's session. One more detail, we did not use a GPT model for this. OpenAI is everywhere. We used a model from Anthropic, Claude 3.5 Sonnet, which is a very good model, and I really like to use it. So we should look beyond OpenAI every once in a while, because there are very or there are a lot of other good models out there, including the Claude models provided by Anthropic. That being said, we are reaching the end of our session today. I think we're set to close off. I don't know, Tucker, if we have anything else in our deck to share with the audience today. Yes, we are here to help. We provide full access to all of our experts, to our Nimdzi partners. You can talk to us about your concerns, your problems, your dreams, and your wishes, and we are happy to talk and discuss all those items with you.
I think that about covers it. Thank you so much, Jourik. Everybody in chat, appreciate all the comments and questions. Make sure that you're following Jourik on LinkedIn. Of course, follow Nimdzi Insights and all of that stuff, but he's a really good follow if you want to stay up to date on his insights. And everybody, please join me by saying a big thank you to Jourik. Any closing words, Jourik, or should we close her out?
I'm all done talking. Thank you very much for giving me the floor today. Appreciate it. I hope people appreciate the event as well, and looking forward to the next one in the series.
All right. Thank you very much, Jourik. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining. We'll see you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.